The sea lay flat as hammered bronze that morning. Not a ripple, not a gull's cry. The air smelled of salt and something faintly sour, drifting from the western horizon, a sweetness that did not belong to open water. The sail hung slack against the mast. It did not even tremble. The ropes creaked once, then settled. The oars had been drawn inboard, their blades resting wet against the hull, and the last beads of sea water slid from them without a sound, as if the sea did not wish to announce their departure. Men shifted their weight on deck, leather creaked, bronze scales clicked softly against one another. Someone swallowed. Princess Dido stood near the prow where the carved horse's head cut the still air. She held 2 coins in her palm, 1 gold, 1 silver. The metal caught what little light there was and held it dull and heavy. She had warmed them in her hand. When she turned her wrist, a thin sheen of sweat glistened across the stamped faces of foreign kings. The smell of pitch and salt clung to her robes. A strand of hair struck briefly to her cheek, and she did not brush it away. "Gold," she said. Her voice carried cleanly across the deck, unhurried. It did not need to be loud. The stillness made every word distinct. "With gold, we enter Tartessos." The word enter hung between us. A faint breeze shifted then, not from the sea, but from inland. It carried something rotten sweet with it. Old blood warmed by sun, fermenting fruit, opened flesh. "We strike through the city," she continued. "We close what has been opened." Her fingers tightened around the coins. The gold pressed briefly into her skin. She lifted the silver. "With silver, we turn back towards living waters." A murmur passed through the captains, quickly swallowed. We had already rowed past bodies. They drifted face down in the tide, their backs pale where skin had peeled away in long, translucent sheets. The water lapped gently against them, lifting an arm here, a shoulder there. Fish circled but would not bite. Even the sea seemed reluctant to claim them. The memory of it clung to the back of my throat like brine swallowed wrong. There were no living waters. One by one, the captains stepped forward. Their sandals thudded softly against deck planks. The smell of oil and sweat rose as they moved. Each man took a coin from Dido's open hand. For a moment, their fingers touched hers, calloused skin against warm metal. Then they turned and cast their choice into the bronze basin set between the mast and the prow. The gold struck bronze with a dense, weighted sound. Silver rang thinner. Each coin fell alone. No clatter, no flourish. Just the hollow, intimate sound of metal meeting metal. It reminded me of teeth dropped into a bowl. When the last coin settled, the basin was lifted. The count was made quietly. Lips moved, fingers separated gold from silver. Gold was heavier, gold was more. Dido did not smile. The sour, sweet wind came again from the direction of Tartessos. It pressed against my face, warm as breath. "We go ashore," she said. Behind her, over the horizon, the clouds thickened. They did not gather like storm clouds. They folded, as if something vast had shifted its weight above them. And for a moment, just a moment, I felt the sensation of being measured. We divided the city into thirds. My husbands took east and west. I took the heart. It was strategy. It was also mercy for myself. If I saw everything at once, I might have turned back to the ships. The gates stood open. They did not creak in the wind. There was no wind. They simply leaned inward, swollen from damp and heat, their iron hinges streaked orange with corrosion. The gold leaf left crumbled on the ground, peeled away from the wood. One leaf bore a handprint in dried brown black. Fingers dragged downward as if someone had tried to pull it shut and failed. The smell reached us before the shade of the gate swallowed us. Not merely rot. Rot has stages. Sour milk, then sweet fruit, then ammonia, and bone. This was layered. Old blood baked on stone gives off a metallic sweetness, like hot copper coins left in the mouth too long. Human fat, when melted and rehardened by sun, smells like rancid tallow, greasy and cloying. Excrement dries sharp and acrid, burning at the back of the throat. Spilled wine gone to vinegar pricks the nose. Over all of it lingered incense. Frankincense and myrrh burned long past their virtue. Sweetness trying to conquer putrefaction. It failed. The air inside the gate was warmer than outside, heat trapped in stone and refuse. It pressed against the skin, sweat gathered instantly beneath our armor straps, and ran in slow, itching lines down the spine. Flies rose in a black shimmer when we crossed the threshold. The sound of them was constant, not a single hum, but layers of it. A deep droning near the walls where meat hung thickest. A high, frantic buzzing around faces and hands. The whine changed pitch when they landed. Tiny legs ticking against bronze scales and skin. They crawled at the corner of eyes. They sought the damp inside nostrils. One flew into my mouth when I drew breath, and I tasted it. Bitter, dry, powdery, before spitting it out. The walls were layered in bodies. Not stacked, woven. Entrails had been pulled freed and threaded through crenellations, looped back and tied off. Some had dried stiff as rope, fibrous and pale, like sun-bleached hemp. Others were newer, dark red-black, swollen, still slick in places where flies clustered thickest. Corpses hung shoulder to shoulder. Some had dried into leather, skin pulled tight across cheekbones. Others sagged. In shaded pockets beneath armpits and between thighs, flesh had softened into a gray-green paste. Maggots worked there. They moved in pale clusters, thick as rice poured from a jar. When disturbed, they did not scatter immediately. They tightened into themselves, then writhed outward in slow waves. The sound of them is not silence. It is a faint, wet rustle, like fingers kneading soaked grain. Blood had run so long it glazed the limestone. It had seeped into mortar and hardened into dark varnish. In places, it was layered, old brown crust beneath newer maroon sheen. Under our sandals, the ground was slick. Not everywhere. Only in patches where fat had melted and pooled before turning waxy again. It felt like stepping on cool tallow. My heel slipped once, and I caught myself against the wall, my palm coming away sticky. The bloody pitch clung between my fingers when I flexed them. Some of the bodies still moved, not lunging, not reaching. Their jaws worked slowly. Click, click. Teeth against teeth. One corpse turned its head as we passed. The motion was stiff, tendons dragging audibly in the neck. Its lips were gone. Its gums had receded, exposing long yellow teeth down to the roots. Flies crawled over the wetness inside its mouth and did not disturb its motion. Desire without satisfaction. I stepped forward and struck. Bronze does not cut like iron. It bruises bone first. The blade met skull and slid, scraping with a grating sound like pottery scored by a knife. I adjusted my grip, drove my shoulder behind it, and brought the edge down again. This time it caught. There is always a moment, the briefest resistance, when the skull holds. Then it yields. The collapse is wet, not a clean split. The bone caves inward with a dull crack, followed by a soft collapsing sound as what is inside shifts. Warmth spattered across my forearm. The smell of opened head is intimate and immediate. Not yet rot, not yet corruption. Hot marrow, fat, copper. The corpse fell. Its body struck stone and bounced once. One arm twitched upward, fingers curling as if grasping at something invisible. It twitched longer than it should have. The jaw still worked. Click, click. I struck again. The second blow jarred my wrist harder than the first. A shock ran up into the elbow. Still, it twitched. Salt, I said. He hesitated for a moment. Are you sure? He asked. I am sure, I said. Salt is valuable, quite literally worth its weight in gold, and I was asking him to throw the salt away. One of my men stepped forward. The leather pouch at his hip rasped as he opened it. He flung a handful of coarse crystals into the exposed cavity. The salt struck wet tissue with a hiss. The body convulsed violently, spine arching, heels drumming once against stone. Steam rose faintly. The smell changed. Sharper, almost clean for a breath. And beneath the hiss, I heard it. A thin intake of breath, not from the corpse, from below, from the stones beneath my sandals. It was subtle, a slow drawing in, as if the city itself inhaled. I looked down. The cracks beneath paving stones were dark with old seepage. Fat and blood had settled there, filling the seams. And for a moment, only a moment, I felt the ground give slightly beneath my weight, as if resting on something not entirely solid. Then it stilled. Around us the flies resumed their layered droning. One of my men muttered under his breath in Phoenician, Baal, close the gate. Another, Argivian, voice whispered, Hades, bar your door. Their prayers sounded small against the hum of insects and the soft, persistent clicking of dead teeth. We moved inward. The sky above the walls dimmed, though the sun had not shifted. The light thickened, as if strained through smoke. Behind us, the gates remained open. Ahead, the city breathed. The shrine of Potnia stood open. Its columns were streaked dark where hands had touched them for generations. The lintel still bore garlands, now dry, brittle, and brown. A clay figurine of the lady, with uplifted arms, sat above the doorway, her painted eyes flaking, her breasts cracked with heat. Inside, incense still burned. Frankincense first, sharp and lemon sweet. Myrrh beneath it, bitter, medicinal, almost like sap mixed with blood. Cedar smoldering in small heaps, resinous, woody, clinging to hair and cloth. The smoke did not rise cleanly toward the ceiling. It hung low. It pressed against the skin like damp wool. Beneath the sweetness lay something heavier, open flesh, Old menstrual blood dried into cloth. Milk gone sour. The metallic tang of wounds that never close. The priestesses moved within that smoke. They were not uniform. Some had once been young, their hair still thick, braided with thread and beads, now clogged with grime. Others were old, their spines bent, their breasts slack against rib and muscle. One still wore bronze rings through her ears. Another had clay charms tied into her hair, some etched with tiny symbols of fertility and protection. Their garments clung to them, linen soaked through, stiff in places where bodily fluids had dried and re-wet. Flies crawled across their faces and were not brushed away. Insects prefer damp warmth. They gathered in the folds of armpits, beneath breasts, at the corners of eyes. Tiny pale lice clung at hairlines. Beetles moved slowly through the reed mats near the altar, clicking softly against stone. The sound inside the shrine was layered. Low chanting, water sloshing, flies droning, and beneath it, something else. A faint, steady rhythm. The priestesses continued their rites. Each carried a bronze basin. The water within should have been cool and clean, drawn fresh at dawn. It was neither, and they poured it over their shoulders. It struck skin with a heavy sound. Not a splash, more a thick slap. The water ran down over wounds that had never healed. One priestess lifted her arm, and the skin along her forearm loosened and slid downward in a pale sheet, peeling away from muscle as if gently unwrapped. It fell into the basin with a soft, wet fold. Beneath it, muscle gleamed dark red, veined with black. It was not dry rot. It was alive. Too alive. Another priestess had lost both nipples. The flesh there was gnawed down to rib. From the exposed bone, a slow yellow seep gathered and fell in thick drops to the floor. They did not react. Their mouths moved continuously. I heard prayers in different tongue. Argivian first, hoarse and breathy. Dispona aphes me, tela vistae. Lady, allow me to finish. Not save me. Finish me. An older Iberian dialect followed, harsh and guttural. I did not know the words, but I knew the cadence. It was the rhythm of burial. One priestess, perhaps once a trader's daughter, whispered in broken Phoenician, Kabal nafshi, take my breath. Let the earth close. Another voice, faint but steady, invoked Persephone by name. Cora, keep me beneath. They prayed for closure, for burials, for gates to shut. The basin at the altar had changed. What pooled beneath it was no longer clear water. It was cloudy, with an oily sheen that caught the incense light in dull rainbows. Bits of loosened flesh floated there, pale and soft as soaked parchment. The priest stood near the altar. He had no eyes. The sockets were hollow, edges crusted dark. Flies crawled freely in and out. He lifted a lamb. The animal trembled, not violently, but in small, continuous shivers. Its wool was matted with dirt and old blood from other sacrifices. When it bleated, the sound was thin, almost polite. Its heart beat visibly beneath its thin ribs. Not racing, measured, steady. The bronze blade flashed dull in incense light. He drew it across the lamb's throat. For a heartbeat, the blood was bright, red, hot. It poured over the altar stone in a living stream. Then it thickened. It darkened almost instantly, as if the air itself curdled it. The stone drank, not metaphor. The blood did not run down the sides. It disappeared into the porous surface, leaving only a dark sheen. The smell changed, less animal, more metallic, like wet iron buried long underground. The lamb's legs kicked weakly. Its mouth opened and closed without sound. Its lungs heaved, though no air entered. The priest slammed its skull against the altar. The crack was sharp, bone yielding. The lamb's skull collapsed. Its brain spilled in a pale rush. Its heart continued to beat. I could see it now, through the torn rib cage, a dark red knot pulsing steadily, not frantic, in rhythm. I felt it then, through my sandals, through the stone. A second pulse beneath the first, slower, heavier. The heart was beating in time with something below the shrine, below the city. Philip had not created this. He asked for it. He asked for a kingdom without endings, and something had obliged. Break them, I said. My men moved forward. The first priestess turned toward me as I raised my blade. Her face was half flayed, one cheek hanging loose so that her teeth were visible even when her mouth was closed. Flies clustered thick at the exposed muscle. She looked directly at me. Her voice was soft. Evcharisto, she whispered. Thank you. Relief. Raw and indecent in its gratitude. I drove the blade down through the crown of her head. The sensation was different from striking dry skull at the wall. Here the flesh was softer, saturated. The bronze slid between bone plates with a dull crunch. Warm fluid spattered my knuckles. Her body went slack immediately. The smell that left her was sharp and fleeting, almost clean. We shattered skull after skull. Each blow landed differently. Some heads split quickly. Others required 2 strikes. Once my blade lodged, and I had to wrench it free, the sound wet and sucking. Flies rose and settled again. One priestess laughed as I struck her. Another sobbed a prayer in Iberian that ended mid-word. We salted the fallen. When the salt struck exposed tissue, the bodies arched violently, heels drumming against stone, fingers clawing at air. Then stillness. The priest still stood with the lamb's body in his hands. The heart beat on. I took the salt myself and threw it into the open chest. The crystals struck the exposed heart. The reaction was immediate. The heart seized, stopped. In that same instant, the pulse beneath my feet faltered. Only slightly, but enough to feel. The incense smoke shifted. It did not curl upward toward the rafters. It bent. It flowed downward along the altar. It seeped into cracks beneath stones, as if the shrine inhaled, as if something beneath had tasted what we had given and drawn breath. The market was not starving. It was swollen, ripe past bursting. Canvas awnings sagged overhead, heavy with damp and soot. The air beneath them was hotter than the streets. Breath caught and held, unable to rise. The smell struck like hand to the mouth. Figs lay crushed beneath sandals. When I stepped on them, they gave way with a soft, wet sigh. Their skins splitting and seeds spilling in gelatinous clusters. The pulp clung between toes and hardened when exposed to air, turning tacky and black. Grapes had collapsed into skins and syrups. Bees crawled sluggishly through the sweetness, drunk or dying. When disturbed, they rose in a weak spiral before settling again. Wine amphorae lay broken. The liquid had soaked into the packed earth and turned sharp and vinegary. The soil itself smelled fermented. Each step released a sour breath. Almonds split in half had begun to rot from within. Their pale flesh molted gray-green, bitter oil weeping onto wood. Fish left in baskets had burst. Their bellies split open, releasing coils of intestine that hung over wicker edges. The flesh beneath the scales were soft and gray, sliding from bone at the slightest touch. Flies covered them so thickly that the fish seemed to ripple as one body. And everywhere, meat. Strips of it hung from bronze hooks, shoulders, ribs, haunches, still wet, still glistening. The surface shone as though freshly cut, but beneath that sheen, the muscle trembled faintly, fibers tightening and loosening in small, involuntary contractions. A smell rose from it, copper and salt, and something sweeter beneath. Not yet putrefaction, not yet full rot. Suspended between slaughter and decay. Heads lay arranged on wooden boards. Oxen, goats, sheep. Their eyes were open, lids blinking slowly, lashes wet. Flies crawled along the rims and dipped into the moisture at the corners. Tongues slid across exposed teeth. Jaws worked lazily, grinding nothing. The sound was soft but constant, a wet grinding, like stones turning in a mill without grain. The dead were not feeding. They stood in clusters. Their bodies leaned forward slightly as if waiting for instruction. Their clothing was stiff with dried fluids. Some still wore jewelry, bronze bracelets clotted at the wrists, silver rings embedded in swollen fingers, coins bulged in purses tied at their waists. Their nostrils flared, their jaws irked. They were watching. At the center platform stood the young woman. Chains bound her wrists and ankles to iron rings bolted into wood. The iron had rusted where her skin had rubbed against it, leaving orange streaks along her forearms. Celtic spirals inked her back, blue lines now dulled by grime and sweat. Her shoulders were burned dark from the sun. Milk stained the front of her chest in pale patches. The infant pressed against her breast. Its mouth latched weakly. Its eyes were open, too aware. The auctioneer paced before her. His voice was slick with enthusiasm. He licked cracked lips between words. Each gesture sent the scent of his unwashed skin drifting outward. Sour, fungal, thick. "Untouched!" he called. "Pure!" The dead shifted. Hands tightened around purses. Silver coins clinked faintly as fingers pressed them harder, knuckles whitening beneath splitting skin. Desire had survived. It had not diminished. It had only been stripped of consequence. The mother's eyes moved constantly, not pleading, calculating distances, measuring the height of the platform, the length of chain, the number of bodies between her and the edge. She would have killed the child if she could ensure it remained dead. But she had already seen what death meant here. Death did not close the mouth. Death did not still the limbs. Death did not take. Her jaw tightened. The infant's fingers curled around her skin, kneading reflexively. Its nails were pale crescents. We stepped forward. The first skull I broke in the market sounded louder than at the walls. The awnings trapped the noise. The crack echoed off stone and canvas and meat. The dead reacted, not by lunging for flesh, by clutching. They grabbed at us in handfuls. Fingers hooked beneath cuirass edges, digging into sweat-slick skin. Nails, some broken to the quick, scraped across bronze, making a shrill metallic rasp. Teeth snapped near my forearm. The breath that hit me was cold and sweet, like fruit left too long in a jar. They were not trying to eat. They were trying to keep us from disrupting the sale. Possession. Ownership. One seized my wrist as I raised my blade. Its grip was iron hard. The skin of its palm had split open, revealing tendons, slick and white beneath. Maggots crawled in the crease between thumb and forefinger, falling as it tightened its hold. I drove my dagger upward beneath its jaw. The bronze punched through the soft palate into the skull. The resistance lasted a heartbeat, then gave. When the blade broke through, the body stiffened violently, heels lifting from the ground before dropping. And in that instant, I felt it. Not air, not smoke, a pressure easing, as if something within had been unsealed. It did not rise, it sank into the earth beneath the market. Each skull we split released that same subtle shift, a downward drawing, a quiet exhale. Above us, thunder rolled without rain. Red lightning flickered along the edges of the clouds. No sound followed the light. The dead clawed and tore. One bit into my shoulder guard, teeth scraping bronze with a high shriek. Another hooked fingers into the leather ties at my hip, trying to pull me off balance. The ground beneath our feet had grown slick. Not just fruit, blood. New blood. Warm and metallic. It mixed with crushed fig pulp, creating a paste that clung to sandals and splashed onto calves. The texture was uneven, sticky in places, slick in others. I nearly fell once when my heel struck something soft that collapsed beneath my weight. A split melon, or perhaps a loosened intestine. The smell grew thicker as bodies fell. Copper, salt, human waste released as muscles failed. Sweat, fear. The auctioneer screamed when the first of the dead turned on him in confusion. He tried to run, slipping on fruit and blood, his sandals slapping uselessly against muck. One of my men caught him by the hair and dragged him down. His skull cracked easily, too easily. The mother did not scream. She watched. Her breath came fast, but controlled. When we cut her chains, the iron left a rust taste in the air. She clutched the child tighter. The dead fell around us, one by one, each blow sending that subtle release downward, as if the market were draining into something beneath it. The thunder grew closer. The air tingled against skin. Baal, or something vast enough to wear his storm, hovered above, not blessing, watching. And beneath our feet the earth felt less solid than before, as if it were not stone and soil, but a throat, swallowing. The palace walls were buried beneath tablets. Clay ones first, thumb-marked, hurried, pressed with fingernails still embedded in the edges. Lead beneath them, thin sheets nailed into plaster with bronze spikes. The metal warped and greened with age. The clay smelled faintly of damp earth and old smoke. The lead smelled metallic and sour, especially where hands had touched them again and again. The words were scratched deep. Grant me death. Let my children remain buried. Seal the gate. Let him wander unended. Some were written in Argivian, some in Iberian, some in Phoenician trade script, some in frantic scrawls barely legible. They had not asked the gods for rescue. They had begged for finality. The palace doors stood open. Inside, the air was hotter than the market. Not dry heat, but damp and close, as though too many bodies had breathed and none had left. Sweat beaded instantly at the back of my neck. The sweat of wine soured the air. Beneath it lingered infection, that faint, sweet, sick smell of wounds gone bad. Philip sat on his throne, alive, too alive. The gold circlet bit into his temples where his skin had grown thin. His beard was matted with wine and something darker. Liquid had dried in streaks along his throat and into the folds of his collar. His eyes shone, not dull, not vacant, bright, too bright. They moved constantly, not tracking us, but something just beyond us. I asked the gods for a kingdom that could not end, he said. His voice echoed strangely in the chamber. The walls swallowed and returned it half a breath too late. They obliged. Behind him, the shadows did not move with torchlight. They pooled. They thickened near the corners of the room, dark as spilled ink, and they shifted, not flickering, but folding inward and outward, as though something large turned slowly within them. You mistook endurance for blessing, I said. Philip smiled. His lips cracked when they parted. A thin line of blood ran into his beard. I mistook nothing, he replied. I rule both realms. Authority without limit. Life without completion. His court stood around him. Some were dead, but upright. Jaws slack, fingers flexing idly. Some were alive, if that word still applied. Tongues had been removed from several. I saw the scarred stumps in their mouths when they opened them reflexively. Their eyes were wet and wide. They made small, helpless sounds from deep in their throats. Others had their feet shattered, twisted at wrong angles, ankles swollen and purple beneath skin stretched too tight. They leaned against pillars because they could not stand unassisted. The women chained to the walls were the worst, all pregnant. Their bellies were too round, too taut. The skin across them shone, stretched thin and veined. Sweat ran in slow lines from collarbone to navel. Their faces were gray with exhaustion. One woman's eyes met mine. Her lips moved silently. End it. I could read it. Her chains rattled softly as she shifted. Philip spread his hands. See what devotion has wrought, he said. One of the women gave a sharp, wet gasp. All sound in the room seemed to draw inward toward her. Her back arched against the wall. The chain at her wrists went tight with a metallic shriek. Her belly rippled, not a simple contraction. Something moved beneath the skin, not a kick, a dragging motion. The skin stretched further, whitening, then a split. Not clean. A tearing sound like soaked cloth pulled apart. Blood came dark and heavy. The smell hit instantly. Iron, salt, and something deeply intestinal. The woman screamed only once. The sound cut short as breath left her. Her body sagged against the chains, but her abdomen continued to move. From within the torn flesh, a small hand pressed outward. Pale, veined faint green, fingers flexing. The nails scraped against the inside of her skin with a faint rasping sound. Then the hand pushed through. Not erupting, not leaping, pushing, deliberate. The skin tore further. Blood ran down her thighs, pooling at her feet. The floor beneath her grew slick and dark. The child pulled itself free slowly. Its body was coated in blood and fluid. Its eyes were open. It did not cry. It turned its head once, as if orienting itself. The mother hung lifeless behind it, her head tilted to one side, mouth open, eyes unfocused. Philip watched with reverence. "Proof," he whispered. The shadows behind him thickened. The air felt thinner. The child's fingers touched the stone floor. I stepped forward. The bronze blade felt heavier than before. Sweat made the grip slick in my palm. For a moment, only a moment, I felt it. If I knelt, I would belong to whatever watched from the corners. If I struck, I would be seen. The child turned its head towards me. Its eyes were clear, too clear. I brought the blade down. The skull was softer than an adult's. The resistance was brief. The sound small. The body stilled. The woman's blood crept outward in a widening arc, thin at the edges where it met the heat of the floor. Philip laughed, not loudly, softly. "They answer," he rasped. I moved towards him. The heat in the room seemed to intensify with each step. The smell of blood thickened, coating the throat. I could taste it, copper and salt, as if I had bitten my own tongue. Then I drove the blade into his liver. I felt the entry distinctly. The skin gave first, then muscle, then the resistance of organ. Warmth flooded my hand. His breath hit my face, wine and decay. They answer, he repeated, blood bubbling at his lips. The shadows behind him snapped backward as his body failed. Not gone, withdrawing, reconsidering. Above us, thunder rolled. The air pressed downward. The storm was thickening. And in the space Philip left behind, something vast leaned closer. Curious now. The child was lighter than it should have been. Not fragile, light. As if something essential had already been thinned. When I tugged it from the mother's arms, its weight settled oddly against my forearms, barely tugging at muscle. The skin beneath my palms was cool, despite the heat of the evening. Too cool. Veins traced faint green lines beneath pale flesh, branching delicately at the temples and along the wrists. Its eyes were open. They did not wander like an infant's. They fixed, dark, reflective, like looking down into a well at dusk and seeing your own face dimly returned. It did not cry, it did not squirm, it watched. Behind me, the mother struggled against the chains, the iron rings scraping against one another with a shrill metallic rasp. Rust flaked away in orange dust where her wrists twisted. Her scream began human. It ended animal, raw. A tearing sound from the throat, the cords breaking under strain. Her breath carried across the clearing, sour with fear, sharp with sweat and milk. Her body shook so violently the chains rattled in uneven rhythm. The pyre had already been built. Cedar logs stacked carefully, pitch poured thick and black between them. The scent of resin hung in the air, sharp and clean beneath the heavier smells of blood that still clung to the city. The evening was close and heavy. No wind. The smoke from earlier fires hung low, tasting of charred flesh and damp wood. Ash drifted in small flakes that struck to sweat-slick skin. Zickerball stepped forward. His sandals crushed charcoal beneath his heel with a brittle crack. He lifted his hands and invoked Baal Hadad. "Rider on the clouds," he called in Phoenician, voice carrying rough and steady. "Lord of thunder, breaker of drought, accept what is given. Close the gate." His words seemed to hang in the air, heavy as the smoke. Thunder answered, not sharp, not sudden. A long, rolling tremor that moved across the sky without wind. The air prickled along my arms. Fine hairs lifted. The taste of metal gathered at the back of my tongue. The child's fingers curled around mine, small, soft. The nails translucent crescents pressing faint indentations into my skin. Trusting. Its breath was shallow and warm against my wrist. I told myself this was strategy. The dead had not fallen to blade alone. The shrine had inhaled. The earth had swallowed. Something required satisfaction. Philip had sought eternity. I sought finality. But beneath that thought was another, quieter, sharper. I wanted to see if the sky would answer me. Not him, me. I pressed my cheek to the child's forehead. Its skin was smooth and faintly damp. It smelled of milk and faint smoke and the salt of its mother's skin. Alive. "Sleep," I whispered. My voice felt too loud in my own ears. When I cast the child into the pyre, the world narrowed to the arc of my arms. The bundle struck the stacked cedar. There was a small crack, not bone snapping loudly, a muted sound. Then the pitch caught. Flames ran quickly along the resin-soaked wood, licking upward in bright orange tongues. The hiss followed, a thin, high sound, moisture meeting heat. The smell came instantly. Sweet fat, burning milk, wet hair curling into smoke. It was not the smell of battle. It was closer to cooking. That was worse. The mother's scream split the clearing. It climbed higher than before, breaking into a sound that scraped raw against stone and skin. The storm convulsed. Red lightning laced the clouds in jagged veins. The sky flickered without rain. The thunder this time was sharper, closer, a crack that rattled in the ribs. For a heartbeat, I thought something would descend. A shape in the clouds, a horned outline, a vastness pressing downward. Instead, silence. It fell as suddenly as the thunder. Across Tartessos, a sound rolled outward. Not a scream, a collapse. Thousands of bodies, each striking stone and earth at once. A low, terrible percussion. Then, nothing. No jaws clicking, no flies scattering from moving limbs. The moaning ceased. The shadows that had thickened along walls and beneath eaves thinned visibly, as though diluted by light. The air shifted. It did not grow cool, but it grew lighter, less compressed. The storm parted in slow folds. The red lightning faded to distant flickers. The dead lay still, arms at angles, heads tilted wrong, mouths open. Stillness is not peace. Zickerball exhaled, a long breath he had been holding. My men lowered their weapons slowly, bronze edges catching the firelight. I waited for grief, for revulsion, for weight, for horror. What I felt was relief. Relief that the air no longer pressed on my lungs. Relief that the ground no longer pulsed faintly beneath my sandals. Relief that the storm had answered. That frightened me more than the thunder had. The smoke from the pyre rose briefly, then bent. It did not climb cleanly into the clearing sky. It folded downward, sliding along the logs, seeping beneath the stones. The scent thickened as it sank, sweet, resinous, faintly greasy. I watched it thread into cracks in the earth, into the seams between paving stones, until the last gray strand vanished. The mother sagged against her chains. Her scream had burned itself out. Only ragged breaths remained. In the distance, in the ruined market square, a single butchered head lay among the fallen. Its eyes had been closed. Now they opened. Slowly, deliberately, not wide, just enough. They glistened in the firelight, then closed again. The wind did not rise, but something beneath the earth felt fed. The mother did not fight when they bound her again. Her wrists were raw where the iron had eaten into the skin, darker than the swirling tattoos of her arms and chest. The chains rasped as they pulled her towards the ships, each step dragging slow and uneven through ash and crushed fruit and drying blood. Her scream had burned itself out. What remained was a thin animal keening that rose and fell with her breath. Milk still stained her chest. It dried in pale streaks against sweat and soot. She did not look at me again. The pyre behind us had collapsed inward, cedar beams blackened and split, resin bubbling in small sticky blisters. Smoke drifted low across the stone. Ash settled on my tongue. It tasted sweet, not wood sweet, fat sweet. It clung to the back of my throat. When I swallowed, it felt grainy, like ground bone suspended in saliva. I wiped my hands on my cloak. The scent remained. Sweet smoke, resin, milk. For days after, no oil or sand could scrub it away. I washed my hands in seawater until the skin cracked and tightened. I rubbed them with rough sand until the knuckles bled. I poured perfumed oil into the creases of my palms. The sweetness lingered. It rose when my hands warmed near a fire. It surfaced when I lifted bread to my mouth. It woke me at night. Tartessos smoldered behind us, not burning openly now, only low embers breathing beneath collapsed roofs. The city smelled like a butcher's yard after rain. Copper, damp stone, smoke, and something faintly fungal began its patient work. The dead lay where they had fallen, arms crooked, mouths open, eyes glazed. Flies crawled without urgency now, their droning less frantic, settling into a steady hum. Maggots worked beneath tunics and at the torn seams of flesh, their pale bodies writhing in thick clusters. The silence was worse than the noise had been. No clicking jaws, no dragging feet, only the small sounds of insects and the crackle of distant embers. At dusk, hooves struck stone beyond the broken gate. The rhythm was wrong for bronze-shod horses, sharper, harder. The rider entered with the last of the light behind him. Red hair caught fire in the glow. His beard was braided tightly. His cloak was travel-stained and wind-burned at the edges. At his hip hung a sword unlike ours, not the warm gold of bronze, not the dull green of aged metal, black, matte, iron. It did not shine in the dying light. It drank it. I heard rumors of the northern Celtic tribes, of a metal that bit deeper, did not bend so easily, did not bruise bone before splitting it. A harsher metal for a harsher age. When he dismounted and offered greetings, our hands met briefly. My fingers brushed the edge of the blade on his hip. The iron was cold, colder than the air. It did not carry the faint warmth the bronze holds after touch. It felt inert, dead, and yet the air shifted. Subtle, a tightening. Not Baal, not the storm lord whose thunder had cracked above us. Something older. Something that had learned the rhythm of bronze and sacrifice and blood. Something that did not favor this new metal. The writer's voice was steady. King Dune requests audience with Princess Dido. His breath smelled of horse and leather and long road. Clean compared to the city behind him. Behind him, Tartessos exhaled smoke. The sky above had cleared, but the clouds did not disperse entirely. They hovered, distant and watchful, bruised purple along the horizon. The dead lay still, yet beneath the soles of my sandals, through ash and cracked stone, I felt it, faint, slow, A pulse, not strong as before, not urgent, but present, not gone, only fed. Philip had believed the gods answered him. He had mistaken endurance for favor. I had demanded finality. The storm had parted, the dead had fallen, and the earth had swallowed smoke. And I had felt relief. The gate between realms had not closed. It had been demonstrated, it had been rehearsed, shown the price, and somewhere above thinning clouds, beyond sight but not beyond reach, something vast had taken note, not of Philip, not of Tartessos, of me. And when the rider's iron sword caught the last light of dusk and did not reflect it, I knew the next age would not ask for permission. It would take. And the gods would answer again.